Good morning, everyone. A few days ago, October 27th, today is October 29th, Chrystia Freeland said tomorrow I'll be speaking virtually at the Toronto Global Forum while I will lay out Canada's plan for a strong economic recovery from COVID-19. Tune in by registering here. And I did not register. I didn't see it until it was actually happening, and I didn't want to register on the site. I was being lazy. And, getting her perfect mom tone turned up to 11. Because why would you turn it up to 10 when there's an 11 on the dial? Here's Chrystia Freeland.
Canadians are careful about their nation's finances. I know this very personally. I'm from rural northern Alberta, which is not, culturally, a place much steeped in the ideas of helicopter money. And the question I hear from there, and here in downtown Toronto too, is this. Can we afford it? I'm going to start with a simple answer, and then I will elaborate. La réponse est simple. Oui, nous le pouvons.
And you know she means it because she said it in French. I mean, is this supposed to be like a more personable Freeland? Oh, I'm still getting used to the mouse. If so, swing and a miss, right? Like it didn't quite get there. I don't think people are going with you there, Miss Freeland. The use of French, no, not so much. Pierre Poilievre says your policies are not expansionary. They've given Canada the highest unemployment in the G7 with the biggest deficit in the G20. And so not just the biggest deficit in the G7, the biggest deficit in the G20. Ontario is going to be budgeting or tabling a budget, and that's on November 5th. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to stay talking about Ms. Freeland and her spending. But I just wanted to note that, accountability is possible. You have to acknowledge what you're spending, and then you have to ask the people, is this okay? You can't say, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of you. Don't look at that book. Don't look at that checkbook. We're not children, right? Like, we're not children. We're the adults of this country, and we get to make a decision. And it's very interesting that we're being spoken spoken down to by, mom tones are us, right? If this is when Trudeau's gone, this is what they've got. And it's not going to work so well. I mean, they've also got the Conservative Party, so I guess it doesn't matter, right? Yahtzee, but still. Some people said that I'm splitting the vote by saying that I don't trust the Conservatives. No, I don't care. You can believe that, and that's fine, but I don't care. And this is my show. I get to have whatever opinion I like, so deal with it. I don't trust the Conservatives, and I don't trust the Liberals. And here is Ms. Freeland, and she said, here's the CBC headline. I don't trust the media party either. It says, keep calm and borrow on, Chrystia Freeland and the new logic of deficits in a pandemic. Canadians have been terrified of red ink for decades. The new finance minister insists things have changed. She's a reporter, right? She may be a very smart reporter, but she's a reporter, right? It's if you don't have the experience, etc., I don't know how she could meaningfully say this. Here's the article. During her remarks on how the pandemic is shifting Liberal fiscal policy Wednesday, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland acknowledged that her words might sound scary to some Canadians, particularly those of a certain age. Yeah, anybody over 25? Anybody who's had a job and paid taxes? Okay. Now, for Canadians of a certain age, of a certain vintage, she says, and I freely admit to being one of them, the idea of increasing government debt holds particular terrors, Freeland said, pointing to the fiscal turmoil of the mid-1990s that defined the political debate on fiscal policy in Canada for nearly a quarter century. But it is a poor general who fights the last war, she continued. And the reality is that today, the prevailing global economic environment is changed entirely. The global economic environment in the 90s, this is an aside, the global economic environment in the 90s was such that they could still be charging interest rate to consumers because they had that much room in the economy. Things were going well. Now we're at zero interest rates, so they can't drop the interest rate anymore. And we're using quantitative easing, buying bonds to the tune of $5 billion a week, I think is what we're doing. And I could be wrong about that level, but I think that's what it was the last time I looked. So it seems like, yeah, the economic environment has changed entirely for the poor, but maybe that's just, and I'm not an economist, I'm not an economics guy, so please do look up an economics guide for your economics information. I'm just reading the CBC and kind of giving you my layman's account of it, reaction to it. But it doesn't seem like what she's saying is right, based on what I know from the 90s, right? Back to this. At some point over the next 6 weeks, Freeland will table a fiscal and economic update, not a budget, that might include an updated tally of how much the pandemic and federal emergency measures have cost to date, and an estimate of how much the Liberal government proposes to spend in the years ahead as part of its plan to build back better. Ugh. Build back better. Hard eye roll. The potential for sticker shock looms, and the deficit hawks are already circling, so Freeland is getting an early start to making the case on spending and for not worrying too much about the debt. Don't worry about the debt. It's fine. Who's going to show up and repo the country, right? Who's going to do that? Nobody. The IMF. Or the UN. Both of those could, I guess, do that. Anyway, back to this. But limiting the damage won't be enough, she said. To ensure the recovery is as broad, robust, and complete as possible, there will also be a need for targeted, carefully thought out investment on a meaningful scale. How meaningful? The pandemic recession, Freeland said, has been worse than the Great Recession of 2008, so it stands to reason that we will need to invest more, not less. That at least offers a point of reference. The former Conservative government announced $30 billion in stimulus spending, equal to approximately 2% of GDP in the budget introduced in January 2009. Yeah, well, I mean, the $30 billion might be nice and all, but yeah, we're working on $1 trillion debt and $328 billion budget deficit, so $30 billion probably isn't going to cut it, Ms. Freeland. She's, and there's more to this article. I'm not trying to imply that that's the width and breadth of this, but fundamentally, I feel like we've got a t-ball player, and it's like, have you seen, I can't remember that one where the kid gets to be a pitcher and then he gets, anyway, a t-ball player going up in the big leagues, right? I feel like it's the wrong person to be dealing with this crisis, staring it down, right? And saying, don't worry, everyone, all those economic anchors and things have changed, and we don't need a measure by which to measure our spending. Everything's just fine. It's not like the 90s. Don't worry about it. That doesn't seem like a responsible reaction, right? There's clearly things to be worried about. Here's one of them. Here's something to be really worried about. Here's something I'm worried about. Candace, take it away.
Speaker, I'm sure that the Prime Minister gets hundreds of requests to meet with Canadians from right across the country, and I'm sure that because the Prime Minister's time is precious, he must make deliberate decisions on who he meets with and why. With that in mind, why did the Prime Minister choose to meet with multiple Chinese Communist Party elites who have apparent links to gangs, illegal casinos, and organized crime here in Canada?
Good question. Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to answer that question. As we all know in this House, the relationship with Canada, with China and Canada, is an intricate, difficult, and complex relationship that we are managing carefully, particularly in light of the fact that we have Canadians who have been arbitrarily held in detention. We will continue to do everything we can to ensure that human rights are protected, our Canadians' lives are protected, and we will continue to speak up strongly and forcefully for all issues that affect us and in that relationship with China.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisker.
Well, we know that some of these bad actors are also big donors to the Liberal Party and the Trudeau Foundation. We're known by the company that we keep, Mr. Speaker, and this Prime Minister seems quite comfortable hanging out with Chinese Communist Party officials, which begs the question, does this Prime Minister's fear of Communist China and his refusal to, for example, ban Huawei from Canada's 5G or stand up for Canadians who are being held hostage in China have anything to do with him being compromised by his cozy relationship with CCP officials?
Good question.
And unfortunately for all of us, the Liberals don't answer questions they don't like. And that's a question they don't like, right? Even when asked at the beginning, the question was, why did the PM meet with CCP elites with links to gangs and illegal casinos? And they said, well, the relationship with China is very complex. You wouldn't understand, basically. It's very complex. We don't want to get into the details. It's very complex. They don't answer questions they don't like. Very uncomfortable questions like, is Trudeau compromised by the CCP? Why behave like this? And why would they say that? Well, the Hunter Biden emails are real despite the lack of reporting on them in the press. And the reason for that, apparently yesterday this was bounding around Twitter, the reason for that is the Biden-Harris administration said, or the Biden-Harris campaign said that if you report on this, you won't have access, basically. We'll blackball you. Threats, right? Intimidation. And, the democratic way. That's how the Democrats do it. And I'm pretty sure our liberals are taking that playbook too. Okay, here's Trudeau and EU leaders meet ahead of US election to reinforce support of world order. I used this because I thought, man, that world order is an interesting term. I can't find any quotes attributed to that. I don't know if it's the newspaper using this world order terminology, or if this is the gathering at the summit that they did last year, the formal, I can't remember what it's called, but it doesn't matter. The formal summit they did with the same leaders last year. I don't know where this terminology comes from. Again, I just want to be as transparent as possible, but it's interesting, right? Trudeau, EU leaders meet ahead of US election to reinforce support of world order. World order, what does that mean? In a pandemic-free world, it would have been a formal summit, a follow-up to last summer's two-day affair that Trudeau hosted with one of von der Leyen and Michael's predecessors, Donald Tusk. That gathering was marred by gushing displays of Canada-EU to political fealty that saw Trudeau and Tusk position themselves as defenders of a world order that had been increasingly under attack from US President Donald Trump. Now, I just didn't have time to go back and look at the reporting that it was very likely that they were using this terminology. It is terminology that I've seen. They're not hiding it. But, it's interesting. It's interesting to note that it's so open, right? It's very, like, what was a conspiracy theory and something to be laughed at on not late night television, like on just TV generally, is now being openly used by newspapers, right? That's notable. It's something to mention. CTV News is reporting. Canada's top doctor calls for structural change to address COVID-19 inequalities. I'm not going to go into the structural change, but she's talking about, hold on, I'll make some highlights. Here's some highlights. Quote, I do see COVID-19 as a catalyst for collaboration between health, social, and economic sectors, and I have observed at the federal level, but also from local levels and provincial levels, she told reporters during a press conference discussing the report. Tam said that while there are examples of decisions taken that begin to address some of these shortcomings, such as increasing affordable housing, availability, and financial supports for low-income and precarious workers, these policies should be extended past the emergency phase of the pandemic. What I'm really keen to see is that this continues, that the report is calling for this to be a more sustained approach, she said. Why can't we have these governance structures beyond the crisis and into recovery? Because we can't afford it. This person spent months saying that we can't use masks and shouldn't use masks. And I'll show you the mask thing in just a minute, but here's Anthony Furey. It's time to start questioning the agenda of Canada's public health officials. My column on the troubling ideological bent of the report released by Dr. Tam today. And I'm not going to go through Mr. Furey's objections, but yeah, like this person has, yes, the top doctor should comment only on what her expert area is or expertise is. But going into like how policies should be crafted into the future is not what she's employed to do. She's not a leader. She's not an elected official. She's not anybody that you can even we can't even get a second opinion, right? It's her and that's it. Like, good luck, right? And how often have they been right? They haven't. Here's Holly Doan. All references to Government of Canada Health's garbled advice on masks deleted from the 85-page COVID-19 report. Dr. Tam, in Parliament Hill briefings, repeatedly advised against wearing masks and even claimed practice was unsafe. Here's a sample of the CPHO Canada advice on masks, not included in Dr. Tam's report from Risk to Resilience, the same report that was referenced there. Had no masks. Government of Canada had no masks to give Canadians because staff failed to stock the warehouse. And here's a bunch of quotes from Dr. Tam and dated. I'll just read them. Quote, right now, there is no need to use a mask for well people. March 28th. On the question of masks, first of all, we ask that people with symptoms cover up their cough or cover up their sneezes, so it could be with a Kleenex. March 29th. Putting a mask on an asymptomatic person is not beneficial, obviously, if you're not infected. March 30th. What we worry about is actually the potentially negative aspects of wearing masks where people are not protecting their eyes or, other aspects where the virus could enter your body, and that gives you a false sense of confidence. March 30th. The effectiveness of the use of non-medical masks has not been well demonstrated. April 1st. You have to be careful you're not putting your finger in your eye, or when you're pulling your mask on and off, you're not touching your face in other ways. April 1st. It hasn't been proven really to protect you from getting the virus. April 3rd. It sounds like I'm talking to myself, right? I agree with most of that, Dr. Tam. Here she is.
But I think the scientific evidence is that if you are sick, then put on a mask to prevent those droplets from flying, in any space as you're perhaps going to a clinic or having to move yourself around the community for essential needs. Putting a mask on a asymptomatic person is not beneficial, obviously, if you're not infected. If you're a close contact of a...
Obviously, right? If you're not infected, unless now, if you say that on Twitter, you are banned. You are banned. Banhammer, right? Here's Ben Woodenfeiden. Excuse me if I got that wrong. Regardless, if you agree with Tam, she absolutely shouldn't be making proclamations like this. Public expertise is based on a veneer of apolitical neutrality. A core part of this is not stepping beyond the narrow bounds of what you're qualified to judge. He says, when a public health official makes claims like this, claims that have nothing to do with her expertise, or field of specialization, or her public role as Canada's chief public health officer, she turns her office into a political one. That's extremely unwise. I agree. Here's Laurie Goldstein pointing out the funny double standard that I noticed yesterday too. He says, amazing at the mainstream media double standard being displayed in the breathless coverage of outrage, calls to resign for maskless wonder Ontario Tory MPP Sam Oosterhoff versus, oh, never mind, it's just the federal health minister of Canada, Patty Haydu. Jeepers creepers. I substituted the word there. Yeah, right. It's a double standard. And it's funny, when the double standard started happening, Patty Haydu was called out for flying when she told Canadians to lock down in their homes. She was called out for other things as well. And the maskless and saying, oh, I always follow public health recommendations. Sure you do, right? And it is funny to watch the double standard, and the media whip themselves up and whip up the population that follows the media, and because there are a lot of them that follow the media. Here's Ottawa. Just in, City Council has voted to extend the temporary mandatory mask bylaw until 2021 to the end of the year. January 1st, you can take your masks off, maybe, if they don't extend it to 2022, because, why not? Because nobody said anything now, right? Toronto Catholic itinerant music teachers charged by the Ministry of Labour for failing to wear a mask. Right? You're getting charged now. An itinerant music teacher tested positive for COVID-19, leading to the week-long shutdown of a Toronto elementary school earlier this month, has been charged under the Workplace Health and Safety Act for failing to wear a mask. Do you have to prove that masks work before you can charge somebody with putting people at risk? Remember this, Quebec is using long-term care homes to house COVID-19 patients who aren't residents. And here it says the employees said at least 4 COVID-19 patients from the community were already admitted over the weekend to a hot zone established in what used to be a daycare center at the one place here. Now, I don't know, this isn't a long-term care facility, but here's Dr. Tam talking about how we can't completely segregate different age groups as outbreaks in long-term care settings begin to rise amid the second wave. Nowhere in this interview does anybody mention that, hey, did you talk to the people in Quebec about putting COVID patients into long-term care homes as hot zones? No? So it's a very interesting thing. I'm not going to play this because I don't want to listen to Dr. Tam again. This is weird. I thought, isn't this how vaccines work? Here's CBC News reporting. A new study out of the UK has found that COVID-19 antibodies can disappear quickly from people who've had the virus, which experts say makes herd immunity unlikely without a vaccine. Vaccines, I believe, work by stimulating your body's response to create antibodies. It's not like the vaccine protects you because it's in your body now. It's helping your body to identify this thing that could hurt you and say, no, we're going to get you, right? I don't know. You have a 4-year-old. I have a 4-year-old. You have to simplify things when they get sick, right? So here's the Google immune response to vaccines. Vaccination increases the level of circulating antibodies against a certain antigen. Antibodies are produced by a type of white blood cell called B cells. Each B cell can only produce antibodies against one specific epitope. Okay, I'm not a doctor, and maybe I'm wrong about how vaccines work, but it seems to me if the antibodies disappear quickly, that would just invalidate a vaccine. A vaccine can't work, right? It's just not possible. Sorry, not going to work, not going to happen, right? Maybe you can be vaccinated for like 30 days or until these things die, but then after that, it's useless. So what? Every 30 days you have to get this to get your health passport? Get bent. But more likely, I think that maybe they just think that people don't understand how vaccines work. Probably. Anyway, here's Maxime Bernier, and he says, more people will die because of government-imposed lockdowns that will be killed by COVID-19. Politicians' power trips kill. And this is the opiate death skyrocket. We've had double the opiate deaths with the safe injection site in Guelph. Double in 1 year. Great job, safe injection site. Brava. The goal wasn't to kill people? Oh, whoops. right? Opiate deaths skyrocket. Mental health suffers due to pandemic restrictions, new federal report says. I'm not going to go through this. This is if you do nothing but talk about getting sick, you're going to feel sick, right? And the news is talking about feeling sick and pushing that on people. And it's just awful. It's just awful. Ford says he's asked 2 MPPs to write a letter lobbying Dr. David Williams not to move Halton to stage 2. That's democracy, he tells reporters. He's the guy who was elected, right? It's not the health official. In fact, you should take what the health official says. Think about it for a second. Look at the graphs. Realize that this is not nearly what people have sold it to you as, and behave accordingly. But instead, we're going to kowtow to ridiculous experts. And here's another one: experts advise preparing for a scaled-back COVID holiday season. I think it's irresponsible, right? A scaled-back holiday season, right? Here's Thanksgiving large gatherings to blame for surge in COVID-19 cases in Ontario, officials say. I would love to know how they know that. I would love to know like how they made that distinction, right? Here's the article. As Ontario saw record numbers of daily COVID-19 cases over the weekend, health officials on Monday are putting some of the blame on large gatherings that may have taken place over Thanksgiving 2 weeks ago. In York Region, 16 people, including 3 infants, are believed to have contracted the coronavirus following a Thanksgiving gathering. 3 families gathered at a home in Vaughan over a span of 2 weeks around the Thanksgiving weekend. At least one person attending despite having mild symptoms. One family member then went to work while symptomatic and infected 2 additional individuals. Every time we socialize with anyone beyond our immediate household, there's a risk that we enter into, said Dr. Kurji, York Region's medical officer of health. This particular cluster illustrates that sort of risk. I don't believe it. Where is the evidence at all? Where did this person get it from in the first place? Why did they think that they were not symptomatic with COVID-19 and went to their family's gathering? Or like if they believed that they weren't symptomatic and then they were symptomatic, how did they get it, right? There's far too many questions and not enough answers here. And if they could really point to somebody who's starting off these clusters. I watched a video of somebody who was investigating the deaths in a specific state, and I can't remember which state, but all of the deaths that they could track down, all the deaths the names of the dead people that they found and tracked down their family, all of them were fighting to say to have COVID removed from the death certificate. And so they had the death numbers revised from thousands down to 100, and they said, now we've got the list of 100 and we're going to start going through this as well. So as much as I think that there was a report yesterday or 2 days ago about the $1,000 fines to students, as much as I think that they would do that, I don't know that this is happening. Maybe 5 or 10 students got a $1,000 fine, but I don't know. How clogged would the courts be? What's the process of fighting that, right? It's a very interesting thing. I'm a healthy skeptic, and I think that this is more written to keep people in line, right? It was your fault that we're seeing all these increasing cases, and if you guys step out of line, that Christmas is gone too, right? The threats. Here's John Tory. He says, there must be a way gyms can reopen safely in November, John Tory says. And then Ontario Health Minister says gyms and fitness centers remain a place where transmission is happening. How do they know? Can they share that information with people? Because I'm skeptical, and every time I've asked for the information to be given to me, well, what ends up happening is I look at like a graph that I create, and it looks like it's not nearly as bad as the news media is telling us. Nova Scotia, here's another one. Nova Scotia to welcome international post-secondary students in early November. Not just Nova Scotia, but I found this one interesting because they're opening the Atlantic bubble. The reason they say it's okay is because the students will have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and it's just the same as Canadians. Upper Grand District School Board's doing the same thing, preparing to allow international students back into schools. He says, I'm very excited to say, where does he say that? Hold on, I'll show you. He says, I'm incredibly ready to say that our program will be safe for our Canadian students and our communities because of the process the students have to follow from other countries. In fact, I should say that if a Canadian was returning to the country, they would have to go through the same process, says Morale. So they're saying that the quarantine process is enough and no problems and blah, 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 blah. It seems to me like if you tick a few boxes, the rules don't apply to you, right? And it's frustrating that way. Here's another one, very interesting reaction to the COVID-19. The land borders are still closed, but lottery system for popular parent-grandparent visa program reinstated this year. Yay, more immigration into Canada, right? Don't worry, citizen, it's safe, and we can definitely afford it. Here's Pierre Poilievre, and he says, after hours of Liberal filibustering on the WE scandal, Liberal chair suspends the meeting, citing health and safety concerns. So this is like this is 11 hours ago, so this is into the night, right? And well, you can watch the video. It's him saying, I'm sure you've got lots to say, but for health and safety, I'm going to suspend this meeting. Basically, I think he was falling asleep. He's like, yep, I'm done. Going to bed. See you later. Terrible. This is what our government has degenerated into. Do you think he could do that if the meeting was happening in the House of Commons? Right? That's from his bedroom, right? No, I'm just going to go lay down here on this couch. No problem. Have a little nap, right? Municipal councillors in Kitchener and Georgetown are seeking a total ban on clean natural gas. Do they not know what this would do to electricity rates? Kitchener Council calls on province to phase out gas-fired power production. The same call was made in BC as well. I understand why it's coordinated and happening. This seems like a distraction. Top public servant offers to explain redactions to WE documents. The whole explanation is just because we can, and there's nothing you can do about it. Read the article. But I think it's a distraction. I think it's trying to bring WE back into the news cycle when, I mean, they've won on it, right? Like I don't even think there's any real serious call other than, and they keep doing this, right? They keep just killing the conversations about it. So how, without any kind of teeth to bring down the government, and there are no teeth to bring down the government because the NDP will support them, then it's a moot issue. It's nothing to talk about because nothing's going to happen. Oh, I'll explain it to you. Oh, can we ask questions? No. You can hear our justification, and we'd really like that in the news. So, and we'd really like it in the record. So please ask us, because there's nothing else that's going to happen there. Here is the last thing. Oh, there's an NDP motion and this is an Alberta NDP motion to denounce the independence movement in Alberta. They're going to debate it Monday. I don't know what game Kenny's playing. He's playing a game. I don't trust him. Not one little bit. Here's the last little bit. I was going to start with this, but I thought there's lots of, the budget is more important than this, but this is important. Global News is reporting the plan is taking aim at masculinity and male warrior ideals. They're framing it in sexual misconduct, but the military shouldn't be against masculinity. Nobody should be against masculinity. Masculinity is as necessary as femininity, right? Like you need both. It is not acceptable to have no women. It's not acceptable to have no men. No women in the army. I mean, I don't even think that was true historically. People always helped in Britain. Well, during the Second World War, the First World War, there's so many instances, and people forget that the sacrifices and the way people contribute in war don't have to all be similar. CEOs don't go on the battlefield, right? Like there are things that happen in wars and contributions that happen in wars. That Laura Secord, part of our heritage, right? Like that was a woman, not a man. There are so many examples, and people say they have to be exactly the same, and that's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You couldn't have built civilization with just men. It wouldn't have worked. You couldn't have built civilization with just women. It wouldn't have worked. It's a partnership. It always has been. And people who are trying to split it and say, you know what we've got to do? We've got to get rid of that masculinity. Got to get rid of men. That's a problem, those men. You know, we wouldn't have wars. We wouldn't have wars without men. Have you met a 12-year-old girl who's in charge of a clique? We wouldn't have wars. Get real. Holy cow, the war would just be cut-eye. And no, actually, women are savage. Have you watched Real Housewives? We wouldn't have wars. Are you kidding? I haven't watched Real Housewives, but I've seen the commercials and the manufactured drama. Friends used to read Perez Hilton back in the day. Just trying to keep up with that ridiculousness is unbelievable. If you think we wouldn't have wars if we could just get rid of masculinity, you don't understand femininity, right? And there's evil and power, coveting power, trying to get power, trying to become more powerful. That drive is in all of us. And women, men, or whatever, it doesn't matter. Sometimes power is being the elderly women in the village who steer families together or apart, right? Sometimes that's real power, right? And the men who deal with the finances can deal with the finances because that's what they're interested in. But the women have their power too. There's something completely missing from the conversation. And I know I'm going off on a really big tangent here, kind of to finish this off. It kind of goes off the rails here, which is why I didn't want to start with this. But it's important. It's an important thing to talk about, and nobody ever talks about it, right? Everything's talking about equality and exactly the same. And sometimes you don't want everything all the same, exactly the same. No two people are the same. And men and women are different, fundamentally different, right? They have different body parts and they see the world differently because they are different. That is undeniable, right? Like just looking. Like if you see two wolves, you can see, and one's male and one's female, there's a difference. If you see two humans and one's male and one's female, there's a difference, right? There's a difference. And the difference is deeper than skin deep and looks deep, right? It's deeper because you experience the world differently. And again, there's so much more to unpack, but maybe I haven't done it justice. I probably haven't done it justice. But this is wrongheaded. This is not the right way to deal with even solving the sexual misconduct problem. Get rid of masculinity, more problems will crop up and you won't be able to deal with it because denying human nature is just unbelievable. And I'm just saying, denying the differences, denying the fact that people are different, that masculinity and being male are inherent. Like you can't just be like, oh, sorry, chromosomes, right? Shucks. Anyway, that's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.